A good amount of pro life activism takes place in Canada during the month of May, including the National March for Life in downtown Ottawa, as well as other regional marches at legislators across the country. Canada has no abortion laws. However, the majority of Canadians are pro choice, and Parliament is so pro abortion that they aren't even willing to pass legislation to protect preborn girls from sex selective abortion, a misogynist and barbaric practice that the majority of Canadians, including many who support a general women's right to abortion, say should be outlawed. The current political climate in Canada, which is heavily influenced by partisan ideology and optics game, has led some to wonder if the pro life movement and social conservatives should instead shift their focus onto helping families and promoting families rather than try to restrict or outlaw abortion. To discuss the current state of the pro life movement in Canada and what it should do moving forward, I am joined by Alissa Golob, the co founder of RightNow. RightNow is an organization that helps nominate and elect pro life politicians across the country by mobilizing people and training volunteers to make effective campaigns. Well, Alicia, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thanks for having me.
So, how about we just get started with an easy question? Why are you a pro-life activist, and what got you interested in this particular domain of policy?
Well, when I was young, about 13 years old, I saw abortion victim photography, and I think that was the beginning of my path towards the pro-life movement. I was always pro-life, grew up in a pro-life family, but it wasn't until I actually saw what abortion did to an unborn child that it actually started to make me think more about the issue. And then throughout high school and university, I came into contact with more women who had experiences with abortion, and so that only further solidified my pro-life position because not only did I see what abortion did to an unborn child, but I also saw what it did to women. And so that was kind of the beginning of my path into the pro-life movement and working full time.
Nice, nice. So last year, it was actually pretty significant for the pro-life movement because this landmark case in the U.S., Roe versus Wade, was overturned, and this was a huge win for preborn child, for life, for justice. Has this had any impacts on the Canadian pro-life movement? Because a lot of times the U.S. ends up impacting Canada.
Yeah, I think that any pro-life victory anywhere in the world is a pro-life victory for people, in Canada and elsewhere because it's saving lives, and that's ultimately what we're trying to do is save human life. And so I think that, we definitely take encouragement from it. But I think the American system is very different than the Canadian system. So we definitely can't replicate exactly what they do. We have to adapt it to, how the Canadian political system works and simultaneously changing hearts and minds along with that.
Yes, and you touched on the hearts and minds, which kind of leads into my next questions. Right now, polling shows that the majority of Canadians are pro-choice, and uh, even though the majority of Canadians don't like sex-selective abortion, there is no political will to change it because the political culture, even if there's a good bill like Kathy Wagental's to ban sex-selective abortion, it's a lot easier for political operatives to say this is a anti-women bill and kind of push these narratives that being pro-life means being anti-women and so forth. So, I mean, what we've seen in the last 2 years, and the debate in Canada is supposedly being closed. Is it even possible, you think, in our climate to propose and implement pro-life policies?
Well, those polls that say that the majority of Canadians are pro-choice, all they really ask Canadians is, "Are you pro-life or pro-choice?" And the majority of Canadians, do say they're pro-choice, but they also have exceptions. So when you actually dig into what they believe, polls repeatedly show that the majority of Canadians in every province, including Atlantic Canada and Quebec, want restrictions on abortion. So they don't agree with late-term abortion. Over
Mhm.
70% of Canadians disagree with sex-selective abortion. In fact, a One Persuasion poll showed that 61% of those who voted for the Bloc Québécois would be more likely to vote for a party that would legally restrict sex-selective abortion. So I don't think you can point to any other political issue in Canada, whether that be the carbon tax or guns or environmental issues or whatever, that has that much support, with Canadians all across the country, especially in key ridings and key provinces that the Conservatives need to win. So this is a winnable electoral issue. We do need political leaders to take this on, but we do. It is also up to Canadians to elect politicians that will represent them in the House of Commons, and that's ultimately what Right Now does, is that we get pro-lifers involved in the nomination and the election process so that they can elect politicians, so that we have a majority in the House of Commons, so that when these bills are put forward, we have enough MPs to vote for them and actually pass laws and start saving lives.
Yeah, so essentially you're saying that in order for the political class, if we want to say, to be able to relate to Canadians, we need to kind of change who is in the House of Commons, because right now there's a lot more pro-abortion MPs, and they're, even if the bill does make sense, they would much rather virtue signal and say, "Look, I voted against men wanting to restrict abortion rights," or something like that.
Yeah, I mean, Right Now was created in 2016, and then there were around 40 pro-life MPs. And each election, federal election that we've been involved in, we've been able to increase the number of pro-life MPs, even under Aaron O'Toole, who was an unpopular leader among a lot of conservatives, especially social conservatives. So we have been able to increase the number of pro-life MPs, and we'll continue to do that until we have that majority. So currently, over 60% of the conservative caucus is pro-life and votes that way, and so we need to increase that, all over the House of Commons so that we can actually pass these bills.
Right. We saw though recently Garrett Van Dorlen, who's somebody that I used to work with when I was in
Mhm.
politics. He was DQ'd out of nowhere for for what some people say because he was pro-life. Do you think there may be uh, attempts to stop your movement with the idea that, hey, if the conservatives are going to form government, we don't want there to be a narrative that it's going to allow for backbenchers to limit abortion? Are you at all concerned about that?
And not at all. And the current candidate who won that nomination race is pro-life as well. He's vocally pro-life. So I don't necessarily think it was specifically because Garrett was pro-life. I think it was because he wasn't, the leader of the opposition's official choice. So they just helicoptered a person in that riding, so because there was the candidate of choice, and they basically rigged the nomination in that person's favor, despite the fact that Garrett currently is still a conservative staffer. So apparently he's good enough to serve the Conservative Party in a staffer form, but not to actually run in the nomination. So I think that created a lot of division within the conservative
Mhm.
movement, especially in that riding. The president and the vice president of the EDA quit. There's over 3,000, people who bought nominations, who bought memberships to vote for Garrett in the nomination, who are very disturbed about what happened. It made national headlines. So the fact is, if OLO and if the leader and if those in the office of the leader of the opposition continue to DQ candidates, it's only going to make them lose the election. It's going to make the conservative movement more divisive, and it's not going to help them in any way. So we'll just continue to do what we do, and it's up to them whether or not they want to win or lose the next election.
I guess that's a good point too, in the sense that if you alienate conservatives, you get less vote, and then that's also a loss for the pro-life cause, because then you get more pro-abortion liberals in power or NDPers. Um, so there are many reasons why women get abortions, and this includes financial factors. There are people who say, "Oh well, I can't miss out on my career right now." There's also a lot of problems with the foster care system. And is there any like social or economic reforms that you think could maybe address these factors and help reduce abortion rates without some of these more controversial abortion bans?
Yeah, I think incentivizing large families like they do in Hungary decreases the abortion numbers. Helping women who want to have careers as well as children also helps, like flex time, longer maternity leave, that kind of thing. Different childcare options. Um, and also, currently there are more crisis pregnancy centers in Canada than abortion clinics. So there are centers all across Canada that are helping women who are facing these unplanned pregnancies get the care that they need, whether they're in abusive situations, find comfort and shelter, whether they need financial help, whether they need baby clothes or formula or anything. And currently there's a shortage of formula, so they're constantly trying to recruit and bring that to mothers in need. So that is a very positive sign in Canada, because regardless of whether abortion is completely illegal or it's completely illegal, there'll always be the pro-life movement there to help women in crisis pregnancies. And, there'll always be laws that we can do to help bring these women more comfort and, help them make that decision to keep life, regardless of, what's happening in the political arena.
Well, that's a good point, and I think a misconception that some people have is that pro-lifers only care about birth. Once the baby's born, it's done. But these crisis pregnancy centers do so much. There's so many religious organizations that are there for new mothers, and oftentimes women only find out about these centers after they've had their abortion, and then they regret about it and stuff like that. So I definitely agree that that needs to be promoted more and
Yeah.
supported. Um, but on the issue of pregnancy care centers, the Liberal government is pulling their charity status. What impacts would such a move have on both the services being offered by the centers, but also the women who rely on them?
Well, it just goes to show you that the Liberal Party is not pro-choice. They are completely pro-abortion because when anybody has a different view on abortion from them, they take away their funding, they persecute them, they kick them out of different committees. So they don't even allow them in their party. So that is not having choice. That's not having freedom. That's being forced to believe one specific way or forced to choose one specific thing. And so I think, if the Liberal Party does follow through on that electoral promise, that it will be a big negative for them. I don't think it's a winning issue. I think a lot of pro-choice people see the value of having crisis pregnancy centers and centers that help women who are going through crisis pregnancies. So, I challenge the Liberal Party to do that because even if they do take away the charitable status of these organizations, to me, there is a plus side because when you have charitable status, you can only have a certain amount of your yearly activities be political. So if
Mhm.
they take away your charitable status, that means that anything that these organizations want to do can be political, so they can be more politically active in challenging the Liberals when they take away their funding, which I think is a great thing because donors are only gonna contribute more if their charitable tax status, is taken from them, and then they'll also be more motivated to be politically active. So I definitely challenge the Liberal Party to actually follow through on that promise and see what happens.
Yeah, well, I guess in a sense, it would likely cause just a backlash in general of support. We've seen that several times where there's either a person or an organization that's canceled in some way, and then we just see
Yeah.
a complete backlash and financial support there. Uh,
Exactly.
there was a poll that showed that younger people are more pro-life than older people. This is quite surprising in a sense because the legacy media might have you believe that the liberal TikTok generation would be more pro-abortion. I guess two questions: why do you think younger people are pro-life, and does this give you hope that the term pro-life generation is true, and the next generation may actually be the one that may end up changing how abortion looks like in Canada?
Yeah, I think it's really hard to push the lie that abortion doesn't kill a baby when we have the technology that we do. It's so easy to see an ultrasound, to hear the heartbeat at such an early age of development. I myself have had two children, and right away have you listen to the heartbeat. So it's very difficult to say that's just a blob of tissue when it has a beating heart right away.
Mhm.
So I think that absolutely has something to do with it. I also think that laws shape culture in a very a positive way. So when you have Canada being the only democratic country in the entire world with no laws on abortion, and you see different countries across the world restricting abortion, banning sex-selective abortion, overturning Roe v. Wade, I think that also has an impact on the younger generation that no abortion on demand for any reason up until birth is not a good thing. So even though that's happening here in Canada, young people are still seeing what's happening in other parts of the world, which is promising. And I also think that, there's a lot of work that goes into the pro-life movement in Canada, focusing on changing hearts and minds in the street and the schools using social media. I know a lot of pro-life organizations have huge TikTok and social media followings, over 1 million subscribers and things like that. So I think that reaching young people where they are is also very important and something that currently the pro-life movement is doing well. And it only helps when you have technology on your side and biology on your side as well.
Right. There might be people watching this who are more, let's say, libertarian on the issue and say, "Oh, well, I don't like abortion, but I still think it should be a woman's choice." Or maybe they're very pro-abortion. I guess, what would you have to say to those who haven't bought into the pro-life cause, pro-life movement, or just simply outright disagree with it.
Well, I mean, even libertarians agree that there should be laws that don't harm other people. I mean, I don't think a libertarian would agree that I could kill my 1-year-old just because I didn't want to nurse them anymore, or
Mhm.
I could, toss away my 2-year old in the dumpster because my husband lost his job and I don't have any money anymore. So they do even understand that there should be acts of nonviolence with regards to the law. So that should just apply to children, 6 months, 8 months earlier than my 8-month-old or 9-month-old or 1-year-old, somebody who's in the womb. And so I think that, it's very easy for libertarians to be pro-life. And if abortion was solely about a woman's body, she'd be aborting herself. There wouldn't be another child that was being terminated. So as a woman, when I was pregnant with my son, I did not have 20 fingers, 20 toes. My biology was different than his. So there is a separate, unique human life in the womb. That's a biological fact. And it's up to us to ensure that all human beings have human rights. And that's ultimately what we plan on doing. And, if you disagree with some abortion, like late term abortion or sex selective abortion, if that's not a woman's choice, then why is it a woman's choice a little bit earlier on? And so I challenge them to have that, logical debate and to look more into the pro-life movement and what we're trying to do and how we help women and how we're trying to implement human rights and go from there.
Yeah, well, Alissa, thank you so much for joining me. I think this was a good conversation, one that's needed,
Mhm.
and wish you the best of luck with you and right now and the work that you do.
Thank you so much for having me on and for talking about this issue, and we'll talk to you soon.
If you enjoyed this interview, please consider supporting us by visiting donate.tnc.news today to make a donation. For True North, I'm Cantin-Nantel.